And of course, we want to cross over now to our panelists briefly to just talk about the Congo election. And Dr. Toussaint also is going to lead us on this and just give us a brief history of where this country is really coming from since Patrice Lumumba up to now, the genesis of it. Many of them, maybe that are the millennials, they don't know what really the crisis in Congo is. But you can give us a brief history, how it began. We know the Katunga cessation as well. Before then, the interest of Britain and the US and the Belgians as well. So all these forces and the Soviet Union as well is actually putting this country in this particular vortex where it is the mire as far as political landscape is concerned. Let's just begin from there. Then we discuss, will Tshisekedi make any discernible difference? And people are saying he's just a puppeteer of Joseph Kabila.
That's a very good place to start, I think. As the election took place in the Congo, I think I was teaching my class, and one of my students brought the very same question to me,
yes,
and asking about why all this fuss about the Congo in the international community,
yes,
why the Congo of all the places. Things are happening in Burundi, in Central African Republic, in so many other countries in Africa, but we don't see that much focus from the international community. Why the Congo? If I have to begin, I wouldn't begin even with the Congolese independence and Patrice Lumumba.
Yes.
I think I would even go back to the moment that Africa was becoming, a petition to become colonies of Western Europe. You will remember that superpowers of the moment met in Berlin and they decided on who is getting what and why. But the Congo situation became already a very, thorny issue because no superpower in Europe was allowed to get the Congo. It was too much strategic for them, yes, to say we can lose it either to Great Britain or to France or to any other, colonial power of the moment, Germany and so on and so forth. Why that? Because Congo has so much to offer in terms of natural resources, strategic resources that all these colonial powers were fighting for. So from there, it should be noted that the Congo became not really a colony of Belgium. It became a property of King Leopold. And even saying a property of King Leopold is too much, I think I'm saying a little too much here, because King Leopold was given really the custody of the Congo while the Congo was to remain a no man's land. Yes. It was just, an international zone where every superpower could come, trade, or conduct business without paying any tax. It is through the development of history that King Leopold was able maybe to appropriate the Congo as a personal property, and eventually he conducted his business in a most cruel way that the many Congolese who died, lost their limbs. The international community came again to force him to step down. The Congo became a colony or under the custody of Belgium in 1908 until 1960 when the Congo became independent. It's the Belgian government that was managing the affairs of the Congolese colony. So when Lumumba comes into the picture, he was the first democratically elected Prime Minister of the Congo. You will remember that the day of the independence of the Congo, Lumumba was just unhappy about the kind of representation the King of Belgium had given to the Congo and the subservient way in which the incoming president was able to accept that rhetoric. So Lumumba, out of anger, I will say, or maybe just to get things right, he stood up and gave an impromptu speech in which he was trying to set the record right. And he was reminding the international community or the human consciousness that colonization in the Congo was not colonization like everywhere else, where violence really defined the rule of the game. And Lumumba was planning with his big ideas as a Pan-Africanist, yes, about how can the Congolese people now rise to the moment and begin to live a life of dignity, human dignity, a life of human rights, yes, which were denied under the colonial rule. But for whatever boldness Lumumba showed on the day of independence and the kind of humiliation he put the King of Belgium into, the plots just started to say we got to get rid of this. Remember also that Lumumba was not the only African leaders of that caliber who was assassinated during those years. Many Africanists, those who believed that independence ought to be not only political but also economic and all the other dimensions, all of them disappeared one by one, from Lumumba to Nkrumah to Cabral to you name it. To skip, just for the sake of time, is to look at the president who ruled the Congo, which became Zaire in the early 70s, President Mobutu. He was a very strong leader. Those years, actually, dictatorship was somehow accepted, for the sake of national unity, state construction and building, and so on and so forth. And Mobutu stayed in Zaire as the head of the state for 32 years until the 90s, late 90s. He died in 1997. 98 rather, but he was ousted from power in 1997 by a coalition formed by Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and the rebels from within the Congo. And this is what brought Kabila further in power. But Kabila further even taking power, that should be said, it was not planned by the rebel group. They were having different plans, which Kabila further was able to surprise to some extent and auto-proclaimed himself president of the Congo. So when he got assassinated in 2001, to create a consensus or to create a kind of compromise, his son was sworn in. Between 2001 and 2005, the Congo was trying to reconcile all the different, fighting or warring parties. Then the Congo issued a constitution in 2005. In 2006, the first elections took place, and Kabila's son got re-elected. But the constitution of 2005 allows the president to only hold 2 terms in office. So the first term of Kabila ended in 2011. He got re-elected in 2011, and his second term ended in 2016. But the Congo was unable to organize the elections in 2016 for reasons that the commission said were logistical, whether money or the just security across the country being big, or the infrastructures, roads, and so on and so forth. So many reasons prevented the government from organizing elections in 2016. But the population had grown, and this, I think, is where I would like maybe to invite my colleagues to, weigh in. Between 1991, when the Cold War was ending, I think the path toward democracy has been a rough one. The people have been really fighting to reclaim the rights that were denied to them during the dictatorial period. In 2015, the Congolese population were there to force the government to organize these elections. Eventually, 2 years later, or maybe 3 years later, we got the elections. And this is why I like to tell people that really holding the elections alone in the Congo has been a big victory for the Congolese people. Just for the sake of it, like elections, it's a big victory.
All right, let's hear from.
We'll leave it there.
Thank you. Let's hear from Dr. Hassan Khannenje.
It's interesting. This would have been the first peaceful democratic transfer of power, I think, since the days of Lumumba, who, as you may know, was one of the leading Pan-Africanists. He's very popular. Almost every African country has a street in his honor. In fact, there was a time in Moscow, there was a Lumumba University that was served international students. And lots of my friends who used to come from Russia knew about it, but they didn't actually know the history behind this African name in the middle of Moscow. One thing that is said recently is we were really hoping that this time is going to be different. Now, if in fact is true, and based on what the Catholic Church says, that had 40,000 observers on the ground, it reminded me of way back in 2002 when actually the Church led the observation of the Kenyan elections, and we had 29,000 observers, and we had the results before the results were announced. at the headquarters in Nairobi. We actually had the real results, the spoiled votes, everything. If that was something they actually did, then I'm a little bit have reservations with regard to the official declaration of the results, because they probably had the real results. Now, even then, even if we have to go with the current result, which is 38% by Tshisekedi, who is still, I think, working in the shadow of his father, who was Mobutu's arch-rival for a very long time in the opposition, for those people who can remember. Tshisekedi's coronation on Thursday, because if he wasn't actually re-elected, it's going to be a coronation, it was more than of a selection, is going to pose certain challenges. He's going to be a president of a minority. Now, unless he actually moves to deliberately build an all-inclusive government that brings in people, including those who are bad from running, such as Moise Katumbi, you know, who was a former governor, even Jean-Pierre Pemba, yeah, who was once a vice president. Unless he moves further direction, my sense, and I think our brother here perhaps may speak more to it, is it may create a foundation for further stability in the Congo. Now, of course, as a country as Kenya, we have, I think, already recognized him as the incoming president. SADC countries have, except some, you know, there is a very loud silence from, you know, Uganda, you know, Zambia, Rwanda, and that is telling. You know, it is important because those are countries that have also been a source of trouble in the Congo itself. And so the AU, I think one thing we should do on regional countries, we should actually help Congo and help Tshisekedi to know that even if it's true that he actually got 38%, he is a president of a minority at this stage. And he has to make a deliberate effort, conscious one, to build a broader government of a country that is larger than the size of Western Europe.
Dr. Mustafa.
Yeah, Debarl, 2 days ago, Italian Interior Minister Salvini petitioned the EU to actually put sanctions on France for making sure that where the countries they colonized remain underdeveloped, so that they can take out whatever resources they have. There is a current serious diplomatic spat between France and Italy. Now, Congo, as a colleague Toussaint has said, falls within that category. From way back in 1884, King Leopold II, and by the way, just to give you some statistics and to put Congo in context, King Leopold II murdered and terrorized, statistics are not very clear, but between 8 and 16 million Congolese between 1884 and 1908. He oversaw and took Congo as his personal property. He established several philanthropic organizations that contained mercenaries that were harvesting rubber, timber, and ivory for King Leopold II, who was actually named the Builder King because he used most of the resources from the Congo to develop Belgium. Now, when Congo got independence, Patrice Lumumba was one of the key leaders. He was assassinated at the behest of Belgium and a few Western countries, and the country was handed over to Belgium's protege, Mobutu Sese Seko, to plunder it on their behalf until he was overthrown. Such is a story of a country that has over 34 billion US dollars, a trillion US dollars of worth of minerals underneath its belly. Now, when we say that Europe, underdeveloped, and contributed to the terrorizing of some of these countries, Congo is one of those countries that we have to. And we got to call some of these countries, we got to call them out to help, to come back and help these countries, because I don't think Congo will be in a position to come out of the mess that the Belgians and other Western colonizers actually have put the country in.
Ambassador Erastus Mewencha.
Just to build on that excellent expose by Brother Toussaint, who himself is Congolese.
Yes, definitely.
And also Hassan and Mustafa. I think we are now in a very difficult situation in the Congo itself. first of all, it's not only the mineral wealth that it has, underground wealth, but also the size of that country. You know, Congo itself is equal to all the Western European countries put together. You combine the geographical territories, it is equal to the size of Congo.
Yes.
And one of the things that Mobutu did was to make sure, at the behest of the Western powers, is that the country did not develop infrastructure. In fact, Mobutu was averse to anything called infrastructure because he wanted to rule this territory that would not be reached by anybody, civilized by anybody, so that he could be a king based in Kinshasa. But here we are. We have just held an election that is disputed, and we can see the reaction of international community, plus internal observers at variance with each other. As one who has also been head of AU delegation at one stage to election, for instance, in Liberia, which was also quite contentious. We are facing a very difficult situation for the future of that country. Because, you know, even after assassination of Lumumba, the UN came in. In fact, that's where Secretary General of the UN, Dag Hammarskjöld, was killed because of the crisis in Congo. And soon after that, the UN then put a force there. And that force has been there for over 60 years, and they contributed very little, but having earned billions of dollars. And so the Congo is in a very difficult situation at the moment. And moving forward, I think, as it has been said, first, Tshisekedi must now go for a broad government. There's nothing you can do because the Supreme Court has ruled. There is a good support from SADC. International community would be lukewarm, perhaps to look at how he's approaching this new responsibility. If he indeed tries to have a broad-based government, Fayulu accepts, then he might move forward. If not, it is already a country in crisis, and this is going to intensify that crisis. So really, the countries that are neighbors, I mean, as has been said, Rwanda, Uganda, Zambia, Angola, who have been really working with Congo all this time, should also then see how they can help that country, because peace in Congo, don't even forget that Congo has got 11 countries that neighbor it, and any insecurity in it affects those 11 countries. Congo actually is the heart of the continent, and any crisis there is going to swallow us all.
All right, and you as a former deputy chair of the AU has expressed last week that serious doubts, they have expressed, you know, their reservation, and they have serious doubts about the credibility of the official results. So what does it portend if a body like AU is not really also acknowledging and endorsing this particular win for Tshisekedi?
The technology and the management of election observation is changing quite a bit. Now when you go into an election observation, there is a tendency for all the electoral observers to come together and try to convey, you know, same message for the sake of the country and not to tear it apart. And quite clearly you would see, whereas some observers were silent, some were quite vocal, including the Catholic Church and AU, who saw that the conditions that existed before the election, because an election is not just the election day, you look at what was there before the election day, and you could see things were not going well, especially some regions not being allowed to vote. Okay, then the election you know, went ahead and took place. And you could see that even the collation process, the announcing process, there was something that's not right. And AU then saw that this country is going to be split, called for reflection on this matter before announcing. But I think in the wisdom of the powers that be in Congo, they went ahead, submitted to the court announced. There is not much you can change now. The AU has now to change its tactics to make sure that you minimize the conflict, not exacerbate the condition. And that's what the AU has done. AU has withdrawn its mission that was going to go there to try and a political settlement rather than a legal settlement. And beyond that, then see how you can build a country together. Now that you are in this situation, it is now for Tshisekedi to walk the country out of this crisis.
So the AU and the EU have taken note of what the Constitutional Court has actually done, but they've not explicitly recognized Tshisekedi as the winner.
I think they are eventually recognized.
Yes.
All right. Let's hear from Professor Noah Midamba.
Debarl, the history of this country, as our friend clearly enumerated, is the sad case of the continent of Africa. And but my point is, there is no, I have not seen a perfect election in Africa. And we're probably not going to see one very soon. But obviously we have to work toward perfection with what we have. This election is not perfect by any means, if you are going to look at the Jeffersonian democracy. The point is that this man received 38%. The point is that election actually took place. The point is that actually Kabila bowed out from the pressure, from basically creating his own constitution and running again. It is important for AU to be behind Tshisekedi and support him to create a coalition government and put something that almost resembles sense and begin to redevelop this country. This country has been raped from King Leopold to where we are now. My own daughter is doing her dissertation on King Leopold and the raping of Congo at George Washington. That's what she's focusing on. And so we need to have a history. And hopefully, if we can solve this one, we'll be able to solve South Sudan situation.
All right. And of course, also, maybe the question will be again on the issue of, if I may take back, the geopolitics that is involved, the US, the Soviet Union, China as well. Because even they say that this is a copy of the Foreign Affairs, I think August 2014, and they're actually looking at what really happened in Iran in 1953, what really happened in Congo in 1961, and also Pakistan in 1971 and Chile in 1973, solving the Cold War's cold cases. So what really happened in Congo? Just to read an excerpt of what they're saying here, that even the 1975 U.S. Senate investigation by the Church Committee, which was heavily critical of the CIA, concluded that of the 5 covert paramilitary campaigns he studied, the operation in Congo was the only one that achieved its objectives. Those who hold this view credit the U.S. government with avoiding a direct military confrontation with Soviet Union and China while foiling the communist attempt to gain influence over a key African country. They acknowledge that the CIA contributed to the fall of Lumumba, who lost a power struggle with Joseph Mobutu, the pro-Western head of Congo's army in September 1960. But they maintain that even though the CIA plotted to assassinate Lumumba, once even trying to get a recruit to poison his toothpaste or food, it never did so and had no hand in his eventual murder in January 1961. And then it goes to also mention the playing of politics, where also China was coming in with the communist regime, and where the Soviet Union also came into play. For you to crystallize for me, just to get to understand where we are at and the geopolitics, because which is still there. We know it is heavily rich and, of course, blessed with cobalt and titanium, and this is what now is actually also fueling the strife that is still in Congo. Just give us a clear picture of where it is right now, given that of CIA, the Americans, the Soviet Union, and China involved, and also the Belgians. Okay.
That's a very, very good question, very challenging question, and I think we're discussing really the democracy in Africa. Yes. And I understand democracy in Africa to be a reclaiming, if you will, of the ownership of our own future. And to some extent, I believe when we assassinate or when our leaders, chosen, elected, get assassinated by international superpowers, they're stealing our future. They're stealing the future of the people. And they're refusing the people to have the possibility to really enjoy that idea of sovereignty to some extent.
Yes.
And this is what I'm seeing also happening in the Congo at this point. Of course, given the situation on the ground, people want to say nothing is perfect, so we should content ourselves with what is,
yes.
And move on. But at the same time, I think, and especially when everybody who has spoken here mentioned the fact that the Catholic Church deployed 40,000 observers across the country, and was the whistleblower to say, no, the elections have been rigged. After the Catholic Church, we saw that international media were able to publish leaked data from the server of the Electoral Commission confirming what the Catholic Church said. Simply to say that, of course, the situation out there is showing again another denial of the people's capacity to determine their future or to choose their own leaders. And this time it is not coming from, say, outside, it's coming from inside, from the incumbent, I mean, the outgoing president. Before the elections, he gave a number of interviews. One was with BBC, and he was saying the reason we are delaying these elections is because we want to have perfect elections. The reason why the international community was barred and denied access to the, you know, for observation, it was to say we want to protect our own sovereignty, because every time they come here, they behave almost like masters of the place, and they dictate their rules and so on and so forth. So all of these are simply to say that if the notion of sovereignty has to weigh in terms of deciding, choosing about the leaders and the future, that sovereignty should not be bestowed onto one person who can substitute his will to the expression, the will of the people through the polls. So this is something that scholars, you know, the international community, and people who are capable of weighing on the Congolese situation should be stressing and emphasizing, because what Africa needs the most is good institutions, not strongmen. I think when Obama visited Africa, he was, you know, emphasizing that message. And why? Because this is my understanding actually of democracy. Most of the people you talk with, or the average people, will tell you that Africa is not ready for democracy, simply because the image of democracy we've seen is the street protest, is the vandalism, the, you know, the looting and so on and so forth. But that is a very, very poor understanding of democracy. I think democracy should be understood as that institution which allows us to have a power sharing, like participation of the people through voting, elections, and everything else, but also the idea of justice, equality. Human beings have rights that are natural, and those rights should be protected and defended. And a democracy gives at least a platform where people can begin to enjoy those, you know, rights, human rights. But also I see democracy, especially in the case of the Congo, because we're talking about Congo representing so much wealth that every other country and superpower out there are vying to say we can have access to them. For me, democracy is also giving the Congolese people the rights to own those resources and decide how they're going to use them. It is understandable that the Congolese people would have so much wealth in the Congo, and when you go across the country, you don't have paved roads, or you see the amount of poverty, which is really appalling. All of this is to say, and I like to refer to maybe, you know, the Congo just received with, you know, another lady from Iraq, the Nobel Peace Prize for 2018. I don't know if you follow this. The recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. Denis Mukwege, was describing a situation in the Congo that is really unacceptable. In the past 10, 15, 20 years, more than 8 million people have been killed. But we're not talking about this. A government that has been in power for the last almost 20 years has not been able to curb, say, the violence, the rebel groups, the, you know, everything that is dividing the country. And to claim that this government was elected massively at the level of, you know, the MPs, it just beats all odds. I mean, you know, no one can understand that. So there is this rigging which is taking place in the Congo, and to which the international community, the scholars and people should say we really need to stand with the people of the Congo, empower them, and at least, you know, from here where we stand, how can we move forward in the next 5 years in trying to fix, you know, a country that has been messed up.
All right.
So many powers.
Oh, okay. Maybe as we're ending up on it, we have this editorial cartoon by Gado, and we can weigh in briefly on it as well. So is Tshisekedi his own man, or is he a puppeteer of Joseph Kabila? Because we can see him there actually is actually in the pockets of Kabila. If you look at that particular cartoon, what would you say briefly? Dr. Hassan Khannenje, then we'll come to you, Dr. Toussaint, to wind up on that. Briefly.
Yeah, just a comment I wanted to make, you know, if I a comment on this particular one. And what you have raised in there, just for the sake of the public, with regard to the foreign affairs, concluding that Washington had no role in the eventual fate of Lumumba. And to believe that is the same as believing that my dog had no role in the disappearance of the bone I just threw at it. Because it does not make sense. Now, you know, all evidence and all the arguments and observations, and just if we have actually to go with the recent analysis of the Congolese elections, even going by the opinion polls prior to election, it's unlikely that Tshisekedi was actually came out the victor. Well, if we have to follow science of politics, for instance. Now, there is, and he hasn't denied, they had talks with the government, with Kabila, before, actually. They were in discussions. Even the time when the election was postponed, there were discussions. First of all, we don't even know how those ballot boxes disappeared, were banned, you know, all of a sudden. Stuff like that just don't happen, especially in African countries. It happens because someone actually wants it to happen. And because of this cloud of uncertainty and the unknowns, it is possible and plausible to believe that Kabila has a hand in the current presidency of the impending presidency of Tshisekedi, which will make him a puppet. Now, the interesting in Africa, though, is we've had presidents who've tried to succeed themselves before by picking someone or choosing a side they think is going to protect their interests until that side gets into power. And we've seen it in, you know, in Zambia, we've seen it in Malawi, and sometimes they become their own man. So at this stage, we can say he's probably still a puppet, but there's a chance once he gets into power, power has a way of changing people. And he can easily become his own man. And if he actually wants to rule Congo the way he should as a leader, he has to be his own man and be able to create a broad and more inclusive government. Outside that, he's going to fail miserably.
All right. Let's hear from Dr. Mustafa, if you may just have that particular cartoon back so that we can weigh you on it. And we wind up on Congo, we move on to Zimbabwe. Briefly, is he his own man?
That
you hold the
editorial cartoon is spot on. It's very clear that this man, Tshisekedi, is basically installed there, is put there by Joseph Kabila. If it's true, if we are to go by what happened, I believe the Catholic statistics and what international organizations, including SADC, it's very difficult that it's highly unlikely that this man won the elections. But that has happened, Debarl. Personally, I am skeptical about elections in such a fractious society in an African country. That has happened. We've had elections. The decent thing for Tshisekedi to do, as Ambassador Mewencha said, is they should have a government of national unity. It's impossible, or it's going to be rather difficult for Tshisekedi to actually govern the whole of DR Congo. And so the best way is to call everybody to the table. Congo is in such a state that no one party, no one man or government will be able to pull things together. We have to give Congo, the leaders, they have to give Congo next 10 to 15 years to put that country back on track. What we should ask the international community, especially Belgium and other countries in the West, is to assist financially. Congo is, yes, it is bankrupt. It's become a basket case, but it has the minerals, and it can pull itself up. Those countries should actually pay reparations and should pay for the mess and the sins that they did in Congo to help restart that particular country. And Congolese can build that country with the help of the African leaders, African Union, and its neighbors.
All right. Erastus Mewencha.
Just a quick comment on that, and a little bit of history. If you look at the Laurent Kabila's assumption of power, he was actually assisted by regional powers. Literally, Ugandan forces, Rwandese forces, and others, Angolan forces, that joined hands to drive out Mobutu. And immediately he was sworn in as head of state, these powers disagreed on how Congo should move forward. They disagreed mainly because Laurent Kabila was then busy signing contracts with all these Western powers who came in with contracts to have mineral exploitation. In fact, his death remains a mystery, whether he was assassinated by external forces or in the palace itself, because that's where he died. Incidentally, that's where I was sworn in the State House as Secretary General in 1998. And in that meeting itself, you could see leaders disagreeing on the table on how DR Congo would move forward. But here we are. Election has taken place, flawed as it is. Now you have the Supreme Court that has announced, the Constitutional Court, that Tshisekedi is elected. I think our effort should be, Congo has been in a crisis for over 60 years. Should it continue in that crisis? I think for heaven's sake, and for the people of Congo, let us see, even if it's in his pocket, I've seen leaders, and one can give numerous examples, who are elected in the pocket of an outgoing leader, but once they assume office, they become their own persons. And who knows? So let's give a chance for Congo to be able to move out of this crisis.
All right. Finally, Professor Noah Midamba.
Debarl, I concur with my colleagues, and we have to move ahead. And Congo need to have its own distinction and its own room to grow. And the neighbors who have gone in one way or another to fight for their own interests need to pull out so that the Congo people can reorganize their business and be able to manage that country.
All right. I wanted you to comment on the cartoon, if I may just put it back so that you can actually weigh in on it. This particular editorial cartoon that we had earlier, let me try and just put it full screen so you can see it. There you go.
Okay, so just a quick word on the cartoon. I think I had a chance to discuss with many Congolese people on the ground about the whole situation, and I will just refer to one comment I received, from one person in Kinshasa, using the Bible to read the situation, and reminding me that even Jacob stole the blessing of his brother Isaiah, and God allowed it to happen, and from that stolen blessing, the nation of Israel came into being. So people should not be pessimistic, because whatever we are living through now could be the beginning of something new. And so I want also to agree with what has been said before, that for the time being, there is for sure a deal that has allowed Tshisekedi to become president instead of the elected president by the people. But given that the Constitutional Court has issued the final word, it is time for sure to begin to think about the next 5 years and move on. So from there, maybe Tshisekedi will grow to become his own man, as people are saying. But for the time being, for sure, his powers are very, very, very limited. In the sense that he doesn't have the majority in the parliament, he does not control the Senate. Even the military. Someone was reminding me that this is a guy who lived, for instance, in Belgium for 38 years. So how much imbibed of the Congolese realities he has, his professional his professional experiences are very close to almost nothing. So let's hope that maybe, you know, with good advisors around himself, and if he wants to bring in some other, you know, big shots from the Congolese politics, he will be able to really reconcile the country.
So you think he's been acculturated to the Belgium's philosophy, so now putting him back in Congo. that is countermanding what actually they're trying to you know, get Congo out of all those philosophies. You think so?
Well, not necessarily incarcerated to the Belgian, you know, politics or culture,
yes.
But simply that he seems to be an element, you know, falling from nowhere in order to reconcile this messiness of the Congolese politics, because there are some people who were really barred from even, you know, vying for the position of president,
yes.
Given their history, their past, and the kind of anger maybe that they could bring to the table. Okay. But I think Mustafa wanted to say something.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that he either, I mean, Tshisekedi has a choice to make. He either becomes King Leopold III or Patrice Lumumba II.
All right. Can we just wind up on that, because it was actually finally to say that I had to win, but I can see also Noah Midamba, you have something. Not lengthy, I hope.
Debarl, you don't have to be in Africa or overseas to think any different. You have to read Ngugi wa Thiong'o's book,
yes.
Decolonizing the Mind.
Yes.
There are people who go to school here, who live here, and their minds are not in Africa.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Noah Midamba. I just want also to bring to your attention this particular editorial cartoon that we have today, and just discuss Zimbabwe politics a bit, where we know that the Human Rights Commission, that is Zimbabwe's Human Rights Commission, has said that security forces instigated systemic torture of residents following violent protests that erupted last week, sparked by a steep hike in the price of fuel. The comments reinforce concerns that Zimbabwe is reverting to the authoritarian rule that characterized the regime of former leader Robert Mugabe, who was forced from power after a coup in November 2017 that ended nearly 4 decades of his rule. And we just want to discuss this with our panelists as we're winding up. We begin with you, Dr. Hassan Khannenje. You think this is a false start for President Emmerson Mnangagwa? We thought that now that he's come to power, he will decouple from, you know, that face that we had of Robert Mugabe. But it seems people down the ground are not seeing any difference from what Robert Mugabe espoused.
You know, if you are a Siamese twin, you exactly can't decouple from the other person on your own. We know that President Mnangagwa was President Mugabe's right-hand man for 37 years. So there are certain old habits are going to die hard. However, this is expected. I think when he came into power, there was an expectation of goodwill from the international community that's going to bring investment. You know, as long as citizens are not getting the basic needs, their patience can only last for so long. And that hasn't happened a lot in Zimbabwe. Now, the country does not exactly have an alternative. I had a chance late last year and spent some time with the defense minister of Zimbabwe, in Zimbabwe actually, and to the command of Zimbabwe Defense Forces. The alternative that exists is not an alternative that a lot of Zimbabweans actually believe in. This young man who leads the opposition, there is a perception, even for some people who voted for him, that he's a Western stooge. And that thing is still very powerful in Zimbabwe. But the international community has been reluctant, especially the West, to open up the investment pockets and, you know, keep money flowing. And that has affected the recovery of Zimbabwe generally. Recently, of course, you've seen a move by the Zimbabwean government to compensate some white farmers, perhaps as a signal that, well, we respect private property and stuff like that. But it's too little in terms of substance and in terms of the impact. Now, I expect President Mnangagwa to face some challenges now, unless he comes with something a lot more radical that's also going to actually displease some of his supporters, yes, with regard to ensuring that, well, if you're an international person, if you had invested here, your business are protected. You know, they have currency issues to fix, they have agriculture issues to fix, they have, you know, political issues to fix. He has to move more decisively. Now, it's going to be tough, especially in part, you know, coming from personal rule of the Brother Bob Mugabe of many, many years. It's going to take at least a minimum of about 5 years to actually consciously do that now. The challenge also with him is he's cut from the old cloth. And so I just don't know how much he's willing to bring about radical changes in Zimbabwe at this stage.
All right, let's hear from Erastus Mewencha.
I think there are three pillars that one to look at in the case of Zimbabwe.
Can we take just one because of interest of time?
Okay.
Yes, please.
And that is the pillar of economy and elections. The economy of Zimbabwe is hurting. I happen to be going there from time to time, and I know that, you know, their currency now that they use in the country is US dollar, and that is scarce. And so it has become very difficult to import the essential commodities to be able to run the economy. And so the people are really hurting. And once people are hurting, the politics become secondary, because at the end of the day, you are queuing to get your petrol, you cannot go to the hospital, everybody is demanding dollars for payment of all basic services, even buying a piece of bread. And so the economy is literally grinding to a halt. And so what the international community, as Hassan has said, needed to do after the election, I think, to me, it would appear the international community did not accept the election. And because they did not accept the election, they kept their checkbooks away. And that is hurting, and that's why you can see the president is moving around South Africa, to Russia, to Europe, mobilizing resources. But the situation at home is also compelling him to be there. And so I think the way out is now for President Mnangagwa to call a broad-based conference, have all the people hands on the deck so that the country can emerge as unity. That's the wisdom we saw in this country.
Thank you.
That when the president saw that the country is divided, he called people, and that's the peace we are enjoying and moving forward is because of that leadership.
Thank you.
He has to lead.
Right, he has to. Professor Noah Midamba, briefly.
Debarl, when Sir Winston Churchill was faced with the situation bombarding British Empire down to its knee, I called for people for their sweat and sacrifice. Abraham Lincoln faced a situation where the country was coming unglued, and a sacrifice with his own life. Emerson Mnangagwa got to be an extraordinary leader. He has to come out of his cocoon from Robert Mugabe, be his own person, and mobilize the people and demonstrate that they have to sweat and sacrifice. There is no extra, there is nothing. The youth are becoming unsettled. The Zimbabwe people expect more, but there's no more. There's no extra. And so if he cannot do that, then it's going to be miserable failure.
Thank you. Right. Lastly, let's hear from Dr. Toussaint.
Well, I will just simply say, quickly that Zimbabwe needs to rebuild, the confidence in the government, which is missing, really. I was in Harare last month. I'm sure people also read in the newspapers recently the money stolen from Mugabe's house, like $100,000 US. And we can begin even to ask ourselves how many other, powerful men from the old regime may have their own banks, under the mattress, in their homes. So if all of this money could go back into the banks, maybe that could help the country begin to, reconstruct. But what I want to say is simply that you feel a kind of divide within the Zimbabwean society, where you have one side of the Zimbabweans, there is really a financial drought. There is nothing, no money. The business activities are really very slow. But when you cross across, say you go to Borodale, you see a semblance of, lively economy. Everything is going on very well. So that divide is something that needs to be, addressed to some extent, and just recreate the confidence that banks, institutions, the government needs to rebuild so that people can begin to work together.
Thank you very much. I want to thank your panelists this morning for that engaging discussion on matters foreign affairs, looking at Congo and Zimbabwe, and also the politics of the day here in the country. And